Do you have it recording now? Okay.
I got it figured out.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I want to shoot a short video this morning and talk about something that's not something that's very clear. It was something that I learned along the way, but I thought it would be useful as new people are getting into Rotorflight. But what I want to talk about is I've been working on and cleaning up my model and my programming in my T16. So with that, I did make some changes to the way that my channels are mapped. And with this new channel mapping, my models are going to change. So on Gethub, I'm going to be putting a folder in that says older model files, and I'll move the ones I currently have there over to that folder, and then as I update my models, I will add those in with the new channel mapping. I'll also include a file that has my channel mapping on it if you want to use that as well. When you go here, and this is, honey, if you can video here. So to load it, you connect up to Rotorflight, you'd go to CLI, click load from file. It's called New Heli Adjustments.
Just zoom in on this a little better. Okay.
Open file. This right here is the adjustment file. I put in the save configuration at the end, so you don't have to top save at the end. As soon as you run it, it loads them, and now everything's good. There's a couple things also to note here on this screen is sometimes looking at this receiver tab on the first screen, I get some numbers that don't always match what you get if you go to the receiver tab. So I like to go to the receiver tab, and I like to make sure that I'm getting 100%. So 100.2, I don't worry about that. I'm getting 2012, I'm getting 198, 199. That's the difference there, but that's close enough. A few minutes ago, I'd been helping some friends with other radios, and I got an off number here when I checked it. And the stick calibration is stored in the model file. So if you move a model file or an SD card from one radio to another, the stick calibration from the other radio travels with it. So you need to go in and calibrate your sticks if this doesn't look right. Don't go and start making adjustments to endpoints in the radio or adjustments here. Make sure that your baud rate, make sure that your hertz is set up correctly, calibrate your sticks, do all of those things before you ever start going in here and making changes. Now, what I've done too, if you look at my models, is when I first started out with this, I had rates on this switch, on a separate switch, and then I had my profiles on this switch. So I could flip through rates here, fill the different rates, flip through profiles. After having several of these going and helping several people get going, I don't see the need in having separate rates. The same rates to me feel good on all my helicopters. So I went ahead and mapped, I left it a separate channel in the radio, but I went ahead and mapped that all to one switch. So if you look here, you'll see that change. So channel 7 is my profiles.
Profile 3.
You'll notice that doesn't go all the way to 2000. So channel 3 is my rate profiles. So it has a 1000, a 1500, and a 2000. That's for the 3 rate profiles. Now on AUX 2, that is profiles. That's where you adjust your head speed. That's where you adjust your PIDs. So I've got
profile
1,
profile 2, profile
2,
3,
and then auto
rotation
takes it to 2000. So there's 4 profiles active now.
2,
And
profile 1,
no matter what I change
profile
here,
2,
if auto
profile
rotation
3,
is active, it stays on 4.
motor on, profile 2, profile 1, profile 2, profile 3, auto rotation, motor off.
Now, when you go to motor off, it just goes to whatever profile is on your left switch is on your SE switch. So this is the way I have it set up now. I'm experimenting currently with the head speed for profile 4.
Auto rotation.
And what I'm going to see is kind of the way V-bar does, keep the motor spinning. I'm going to experiment with that on full head. I set full head speed to 500. So I'm going to let that, from a governor standpoint, let it pull it down to 500 and then go from the transition from 500 back up. So that I haven't got fully tuned in yet, but that's where I'm headed with it. If you go to rates, you can see here that
Profile 1.
You have profile 1,
Profile 2.
profile 2,
Profile 3.
profile 3, those match up. Nothing you do with this stick
Motor on. Auto rotation. Motor off.
has any effect on the rate profiles. I'm running 14 degrees pitch across
Profile 2.
all three, but this is where that you could dial in less or more pitch in your different profiles with your different head speeds, having it on one switch.
Rotorflight armed. Disarm.
Okay. Now, one thing that I see that I see commonly is that when you're new to this system, you need to have an understanding of what flashing firmwares. And there are 5 firmwares on these radios in this system that you need to have up to date. I'll start with Rotorflight. You can see here on the configurator that you have your target, that's your flybarless unit. So that's when we're talking about the Rotorflight unit. This is the Nexus unit. It shows up as Nexus F7. So you need to have the latest version of Rotorflight. And if you click here, once you plug in and connect, click on Update Firmware. On mine, it's auto populating, but you click here on the bottom and you can see your firmware. There's not a new release for the Nexus unit, but that's how you go and check it. Okay.
Can you show us that again? I just zoomed in.
Okay, so you would click on Update Firmware.
Mm-hmm.
So click on Disconnect, Update Firmware.
Mm-hmm.
Then it auto selects on mine to the Nexus F7. Then you click on this drop down and it'll show you what are the releases. So this is the only official release for the Nexus. Okay, that's flybarless units number 1. Number 2 is your receiver. The way that I check that, and you have to power your radio off to check this. It's telling me receiver still connected. I'm going to unplug the power from, and this is my Tron 7.0. The radio went ahead and shut down. Now I'm going to plug this back in. And honey, can you show there's a light right here, and this light will blink slowly.
There we go.
While it's blinking slowly, it's looking for the transmitter. It's looking for signal to connect up. When that changes to a fast blink, you'll know that it's went into Wi-Fi mode. Once it goes into Wi-Fi mode, then you can connect to it on your computer. And you can check the firmware on the receiver. This is also the same way that you update the firmware on the receiver. So I think I have that one set 40
There
seconds.
goes dash flash.
Okay, so you come up here now. Okay, so I'll go to Wi-Fi networks. If you have trouble with your computer auto connecting back, go in and disconnect from your home Wi-Fi and just make sure that it's not auto trying to connect back over. But we'll see this show up here momentarily. There it is, Express LRS. You hit connect. Okay, so this is the interface for the receiver. So you can see here, firmware revision 3.4.3, and that's how you check that one. Okay, when you are updating your firmware on this one, you click here on firmware.
That says update.
Yes.
It does not say firmware.
When you're updating your firmware,
It says firmware.
it says firmware update, but you click on update and then firmware update. Did I say firmware? Okay. Yeah, update. Now, you select your firmware file and you load it from here, and that's the fastest way that I found to update the receivers. Okay? So that's number 2. So you got flybarless is number 1, then your receiver is number 2. Pause the video a second. And we're back. I've powered on my transmitter now. I've gone into Rotorflight. I connected to Rotorflight. And you can see I'm not getting anything on the controls. And what's happened is I've left this powered in. So honey, if you see here, that light's still flashing fast.
It is.
If you power on if you connect up your Nexus to your computer and your receiver goes into Wi-Fi, at the point when you turn your transmitter on, it'll never connect. So what you have to do is, once your transmitter is on, pull the power, plug the power back in, and then it'll connect up. And you can see here, and this comes as a default, the signal strength on Edge TX, and you can see that it's connected. Now, what I want to do next is I want to check, because we start out as number 1 is your fly wireless unit. Number 2 is you need to have the firmware uploaded or updated on your receiver. Next, your transmitter module. So whether you have an external module like I have here, or you have an internal module inside the radio, that firmware has to be flashed. You can see here on my external module, it shows version 3.4.3, and you know that that's the latest. But if you have an internal module, it's not going to show that. So the best way that I know to check that is to go to System, go to your Express LRS, Lua. This is going to show that I'm running F1000. I just leave the telemetry ratio on standard and it auto sets. This is 1 to 128. Switch mode wide. Model matches off with an ID of 1. Transmit power is 250 milliwatts dynamic. Now, honey, can you see here on the bottom left?
We can.
3.4.3. That's your firmware. When you go to Express LRS, that matches right up with the latest release, 3.4.3. Okay, so now we've got fly wireless unit, receiver, transmitter module, whether that's internal or external. Okay, now there's 2 more firmwares that we need to have up to date, and I'm going to show these. The best way that I have found to check these, and you can check them both at the same time, is to power the radio up in bootloader mode. So to power the radio up in bootloader mode, you hold T4 and T1 to the inside. So you push those to the inside and then press the power button. Okay, now this will show you your final 2. So you have the bootloader. The current version is 2.10.1. That's your bootloader. Then right here, Edge TX, TX16 version 2.10.1. That's the actual firmware, Edge TX firmware. But you want to make sure that you get both of those. I made the mistake of loading the firmware without loading the bootloader. So make sure, and there's YouTube videos out there that show you how to do it. This is how you write the firmware once you do it. And these 2 files here, this one on top is the bootloader. You don't load it here. You go into the system menu in the model to load that one. And then this one is the one that I would load up to load the new version of Edge TX on the radio. So that's where you get to those final 2. So let's go back over it one more time. You have your Nexus fly wireless firmware. You have a receiver firmware. Okay, if you're running a Fly Dragon, it's also has the same thing. You have the board that's running Rotorflight. You have a version of Rotorflight on that board. This also has a receiver built into it, so you have to flash that receiver. So there's 2 firmwares that need to be loaded in this Fly Dragon unit. Then you have your transmitter module, external or internal. Both have to have the firmware updated. And then you have your bootloader, your Edge TX bootloader, and your Edge TX software. So that's the 5 different ones. The current version of Express LRS is 3.4.3, and the current versions on the Edge is 2.10.1. Is current versions. Also, if you look, I made a post up on Facebook with a link to my Gethub, or excuse me, not my Gethub, but my Thingiverse. So I created a tool to help with calibration of the tail. So that's free. Download that off Thingiverse. You can print it out. I'll be putting this CLI that you saw me load that gives these new setups. Just be aware that when you are in Rotorflight, it is now going to be switching on the way I have it set on mine. Those two channels that are coming over will be switching the rates and the profiles. So if going to profile 4 for auto rotation, you need to make sure that you have a PID load in profile 4.